Let's see what we got here. We got William in Arizona. You're on with Don and Matt.
Hi, Matt. Hi, Don. How are you guys?
Hey. Irritated.
that comment is very funny. Anyways, so good job, both of you, for a great show.
Thanks.
Matt, I called last time, a few weeks ago, and I got hung up, but you didn't hang up on me. My phone died. That was unfortunate.
Okay.
Anyways,
modern technology.
Modern technology, exactly. Every week that goes by and I don't call, my questions get more and more. So I know we're not going to get to most of them.
Start with the best one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I had
We'll take one or two
for today, but I'm going to start with the second one, as the caller screener told me to start with the second one, then go.
Okay.
Time to go to the first one. So for the sake of the argument, I'm going to say that I say I'm an atheist, but I don't know if I am or not, but that goes to my first question. So my question for now is about intelligent design.
Okay.
And what I want to bring an example, and I want to see where it goes. Let's say you're walking that famous down the beach, and you find 1,000 old watches, from grandpa watches to pocket watches or whatnot, but they're very old and dated and stuff. And let's say you don't have anything else to compare it to in order to say whether it's intelligently designed or it is naturally occurring. Okay.
Hang on.
Yes.
You said these were watches, old watches, right?
Well, I'm saying as far as old watch as an example of something complex, something that has...
No. Once you define it as a watch, you know it was designed.
Well, I'm saying it's a watch because now we know what it is. But back then you're walking and you don't know what it is. Let's say you just don't know what it is.
I think this analogy has been poisoned.
I'm walking along, and I find 1,000 things that I don't know what the fuck they are.
Yeah. So you don't have
let's start there.
What that specific thing is. Okay. And then
I don't know why we couldn't have just started with one instead of 1,000, but keep going.
Well, I'll tell you. And then you get to somebody who will design a watch for you. Now you have an example of a watchmaker who builds a watch for you. Is that safe to say, now that you have somebody who designed a watch and you understand, now you label it as a watch and all that stuff, then you compare it to the old ones and you see the mechanism in those, is it at that point safe to say those are all intelligently designed as well?
I can't say at what point you would have sufficient information. It's not just a single one or somebody being able to replicate something. But if you have zero evidence for something occurring naturally and you have evidence for it being actually constructed, designed, planned out by a thinking intelligence, then it's a reasonable inference to say until sometimes somebody demonstrates watches reproducing and coming into existence without being designed, all of the evidence points to this conclusion. And so like every other conclusion that we have, it is tentative and it is subject to revision when new information shows up, but it's a reasonable inference.
So if I understand you correctly, having one watchmaker making you a watch or a couple of watches for you, that is so at that point sufficient to say the ones that you saw on the beach and they have the same characteristics are also designed, even though you don't know who made them or who designed them. Is that safe?
It's reasonable to say it's reasonable that is an inference that this is the most likely explanation.
Okay. So when I was thinking about all of this, the reason I came to this question was we know about life on Earth, all the things that are alive, from plants all the way to animals or any sort of live entity. Our understanding was everything is happening naturally. Everything evolves, everything reproduces and all that stuff. But what happens when we think about things that humans did, like dogs and bananas and things that we made? So that's an example of intelligence.
You mean where we guided the evolution? Is that what you're referring to? What I'm saying is
now we have so obviously I'm not entering any supernatural intelligence in that. I'm saying that we know that human science can make a new species, like a dog.
Yes, it's called artificial selection, but and sometimes you can work towards a goal And sometimes it's just we're describing something that there's no more thought in it than there is in natural selection. It's just that there's an agent doing it.
How do we rule out, let's say, there was other scientists that they got, like, let's say, wiped out throughout time, and we don't have records of their work, but maybe they are the ones who actually made the wolf, and then we made dogs out of wolves.
Okay.
How do we rule that out?
Who said
it was naturally?
Who said we ruled it out?
Oh, I'm not saying you did. I'm saying, is it a possibility that if we can say...
We don't know if it's possible or not. We don't know if it's possible or not. That possibility would have to be demonstrated. So the
possibility was demonstrated by us making dogs.
No. The fact that we can do something doesn't mean that it's possible that somebody else did something before us.
The fact that we can do it now doesn't mean that it was done it could have been done in the past.
Because we could be, for all we know, we could be the first intelligence to get to this level of ability to do anything remotely like that. So if that's the case, then what you're basically arguing for is possibility on the grounds that nobody's been able to demonstrate it's impossible. But possibility needs to be demonstrated. You can't just say it's possible. I mean, there are people who talk about this. It's called directed panspermia or undirected panspermia, if it's just like life floating through the galaxy. But the time to believe that somebody actually designed the wolf is when you have evidence for the wolf being designed. And this applies at every stage throughout the cobweb that is life. When the earliest self-replicating molecules arose, we don't know how or why that happened. Nobody's saying that nobody's saying it's impossible that it was some intelligence. It's just the time to believe that it was done by an intelligence is when there's evidence for that. And you can't go 20 steps down the chain and say, well, humans chose to breed these dogs with these dogs and then gradually got to some other dog and say maybe that's what aliens did with early life forms to get to a wolf. Well, you can't say that it's possible. You can't say that it's impossible, and the time to believe it is when there's evidence for it.
Let me add that you can think of 1,000 possible scenarios where people came from outer space and did this, or sky pixies did that, or whatever fantastic story you want to come up with, and you can come up with thousands of those, and you don't just like pick one out of the hat and say this is the truth until I prove it false. You have to come up with evidence for these things. You should follow the evidence to where it leads, not invent stories and try to find, because if you're inventing stories, you're off in space, right? There's a million possible things you could come up with.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. It's just that my mind was like, okay, if all the watches I didn't know who made it, and then I found somebody who can make a modern watch, it's like somebody made a dog when there was no dog.
Nobody made a dog. Nobody made
have any evidence that somebody made a dog.
Nobody made a dog in the way that... Stop! Nobody made a fucking dog in the way that we make a watch. Those things are not even remotely in the same ballpark of making something.
Yeah, that's another
We
good
just
point.
created a new species.
The mechanism for dogs breeding is not something that we made. We can manipulate it, but that's different from creating gears and gear timing and springs and metal casing and learning all this stuff to put together a mechanical object that we thought of. It's not like there was necessarily something in the universe that was like, oh, here's how you could make a watch. If you breed this metal with this metal and you shape it this way, it's going to wind up a watch. Those two things aren't remotely comparable. And this is the problem of trying to argue by analogy, because now you're looking at a watch going, hey, we could have done that. And clearly, we made dogs. No, we did not make dogs. We manipulated the breeding of dogs for specific results.
And so you can't call it design.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying. So I'm trying to understand. Yeah. Okay. If you give me a few minutes for my second question very quick, if you can give me a quick answer on that as well.
I'll try. And Don can try.
So, okay. Matt, do you remember that episode you were talking about the split brain patients and left brain and right brain behaving or responding to answer differently?
Yes.
So that intrigued me to ask this question, and I did a lot of watching the videos of that you suggested the doctors and different.
V.S. Ramachandran.
I asked a couple of neurosurgeons like casual conversations, and it seemed somewhat the conclusion was in people who are not split brain patients, like normal people, the right brain is quote unquote kind of a silent partner and gets suppressed by what the left brain says. Like if what you say may or may not agree with your right brain. You know what I'm trying to say? Like your left brain will say something
I don't know.
that you communicate verbally, but if they diagnose your right brain,
you're probably calling the wrong show for this sort of question.
Different. Pardon me?
You're probably calling the wrong show for this sort of question. Can you relate it to God somehow, or theism, or?
Yeah. So that's what I was going to say is this: what if how do we go down this path? If I say I'm an atheist, which I do say that, how do we know that your right brain is actually in the agreement with that? What if you are split into two, but your right brain is saying something?
Maybe you have two souls and they're fighting it out. Yeah.
Okay.
No, but,
How many more things are you going to come up with that we can't possibly prove? Maybe my right hemisphere and my left hemisphere are in agreement. Maybe they're not. Maybe the model of the brain that says the right hand's a silent partner or right side's a silent partner. Maybe that's wrong. We don't know. All we do know is that when in the specific patient study that V.S. Ramachandran was talking about, when you sever the corpus callosum and the two halves can communicate independently, one of them was a theist and one of them was not.
Correct.
Now, does that mean that half of my brain is secretly a theist? Well,
maybe.
The reason I think that's unlikely is because at one point I was a theist and now I'm not. And so either my left and right hemispheres, under the model you're suggesting, switched their beliefs, or it's a little more complicated than that. And at the end of the day, I'm just not convinced there's a God, whereas I used to be. But what we do know, from that study, is that it's possible for two completely independent personalities holding different beliefs to communicate independently once that surgery's been performed. And that alone, irrespective of whether there's a God or whether half of your brain is lying or anything else, it's a big problem. And it relates to what Don was talking about earlier today, which was this issue of ensoulment. When that happens and you now have two distinct personalities that communicate independently, have different likes and preferences, does that mean that one half got a soul and the other one is soulless? Does it mean they have half a soul? Did God put an extra soul in when you did the surgery? Like, is he sitting around in the operating room going, damn, this is really going to mess stuff up. Let me stuff another soul in that person's head.
Well, yeah. No, I understand, but I'm not talking about the soul being real. I'm talking about people's belief. Is it possible that your right brain that cannot communicate with others believes in God?
I don't know.
You don't believe in God.
I don't know. I don't know.
And we may never know because of the ethics of conducting such an experiment.
Yeah, there are certain experiments we just can't run around doing on the general population, no matter how amusing it might be to think about.
Find out.
And there's there are some things that medical ethics prevent us from doing, even if you had volunteers. Like if I went in and said, I think I'd like my corpus callosum to be severed so that I can experience that and communicate and be two people, and I want to know what that's like. Nobody's ever going to do that.
No.
No. I mean,
they'll show you the door pretty quick.
Maybe without splitting, they could just directly ask the right, so like have a test on the right side.
But if the model is that the left brain can suppress the right brain, then you can't ask it questions until you do this other procedure. But the truth is, we don't know. So I would email V.S. Ramachandran, although I don't know that you'd necessarily get an answer, because I would expect that his first answer is, I don't know. But then he might tell you some stuff about neuroscience and what he suspects given the research he's done. Brilliant man, wonderful work, especially with mirror neurons and phantom limb syndrome.
He's done some very fascinating stuff.
I love listening to him talk.
Totally agree with you.
Yep.
Totally agree with you.
On that note, we're going to head out.
Two questions for today.
Yay.
I really appreciate you guys.
Sure.
I appreciate it, William. I'm going to